Right, we now delve deep into the section about Cairngorm Mountain, which is the ski mountain in Scotland that's right in the middle of the country, pretty much. So it benefits from protection from both the North Sea and the Atlantic in terms of warm winds. It's got a long history like the others, and I guess at the moment it's going through quite a troubled history with its management and stuff. And so while it's a great place to ski, it has many problems, and we'll discuss those later. So this is a map showing the area as it was in the early 2000s. So there's quite a few lifts on this map that don't exist anymore. Most notably the ones to the areas in between square 7 and 6 in the Corrin Assist. And it has a long access road going up it from Aviemore, which is its main town. So this is a piece map from about 2001, 2002, just after the funicular railway was built. And this is what it looks like now. So they've changed the look of the map, and there are a number of lifts now that are missing. And if we go back at its peak, in this one it says there's 17 lifts. At its peak there was 18 at Cairngorm, and there's now only 11 that operate, which is a bit of a shame. And we'll come round to why that is. But all the other mountains have been able to keep up with their programme of replacing lifts or maintaining them, and Cairngorm hasn't. So I rate Cairngorm 43, which is kind of about it's second from last basically, but that's still pretty good considering some of the low scores it gets there. So it was the second of the ski resorts in Scotland to open, very much pioneering people that opened it and people with lots of money that invested. And it has two valleys. They also thought about developing another valley further to the south called Lurcher's Gully. And it has great skiing, and I think some of the lifts are quite fast, and amazing views, but the customer service is really poor. The lifts have been left to age without replacement, and they just spend way too much money and don't seem to get much out of it really, because it's bureaucratic nonsense, and it's a publicly owned ski area compared to the others that are private or limited, publicly limited businesses. In the summer, the mountain caters to visitors and sightseers, but doesn't have many other attractions than the views and the funicular railway journey. And people aren't, in fact, allowed out when they get to the top of the funicular. There's some contract or agreement that was signed when the funicular was built that means that poor visitors, they can go up there, but they're trapped at the top station. They're not allowed to leave the building, although I think some have tried. It has been recommended though that they could provide some mountain biking trails, a zip line or zip coaster. It was a zip tour, that was what they called it. So multiple zip lines, one after the other, and a mountain coaster. And as usual, I'm going to show you the photographs with some terrible snow conditions first, and then ones with good snow and too much. So yeah, 2002 was the worst year they've ever had. I think 2005 and 2007 weren't particularly great either, but all the years in between have been fine. So it was a real shame that the year after they had the funicular put in, they had just very minimal snow. These are photos from around 2006, I think they are. And they got snow, but then a lot of it melted, and so that's when you end up with these areas where there's lots of snow between the fences and not much snow elsewhere. But it's quite often they get good snow, particularly up at the top in what's called the Ptarmigan Bowl, which is, you can see in the top left photo there. Again, the middle photo at the bottom is the ptarmigan boulder again, and the bottom, the top right photo is near the summit, and the top left photo is looking down from pretty much the base station area. And you'll probably have to see from that one of the lifts has got a curve in it, which we'll see later. And there's too much snow, so it kind of feels that about one every 10 years there's not enough snow. About 2 or 3 years out of every 10 there's too much, and the rest of the time are pretty average. But in this one from about 2013, they were having to dig out the lifts at the summit. These are all sent to me by my friend Graham, and yeah, standing at the same height as the haul rope is kind of a bit unusual. One of the good things though is all this snow means that the mountain has been able to afford to purchase lots of new machines. So they've got since 2010 a piston bully 300, a piston bully 600, a 600 with a winch, a 600 limited with a 4.6 ton winch, and a piston bully 100 with a people cab on it. Although I think the people cab's now been moved onto the back of one of the 600s. They've also got a couple of pipe cutters and a snow bucket for moving stuff around. These are photographs of when they've had like springtime snow, and quite often Cairngorm is the last one to operate because of the snow it can hold at the top, and getting to there has not been a problem because the funicular has allowed people to get to that height to enjoy that snow. So places like Nevis Range, while they might have snow high up, same with Glencoe, getting to that snow is kind of tricky, and the main lifts at the top of Glencoe are quite often inaccessible later on in the season. And yeah, skiing can be done really late into the season. One of these lasses, I think it's the one in the top right, is Helen Rennie, and she's held a record for being able to ski every single month within every single year for 10 years. So that means skiing there January, February, March, April, May, June, July, even in August, and then September, and then by October the new snow started to fall again. So that's a real amazing thing. So there's some photos of some of the machines they have there. They probably have the best collection of piston bullies in the UK in terms of quantity. There's a few more there besides what's listed, so I think they've got a few older ones as well. And they've done night skiing there before as well, which is something that the other areas haven't really done, apart from Glenshee, which has a dedicated night slope. But this place, they've just take floodlights on poles with generators built into the bases, and 10 of them later, and they've got the slope lit, but it's not very efficient. Snowmaking at Cairngorm's been a bit of a thing which has gone on for many years. So many people feel that the snowmaking at Cairngorm is quite a new thing, but in actual fact the first snowmaking system existed at Cairngorm in the mid 1960s to the late 70s, before being removed, as snow farming, pisting machines and snow fences proved more efficient and effective into the 1970s. The original system comprised of about 50 portable lancers on sleds or tripods, quite similar to what you find in North America now, and we just don't have those systems in Scotland anymore. It was installed in the Cairngorm Mountain after being removed from its previous location at Mar Lodge, a failed ski resort around Braemar that was never at a high enough altitude to be successful, and after a few bad years they had to shut, and so the lifts and the snowmaking, everything was sold on to other people around them. But anyway, basically worked with the high pressure water pumped at around 150 psi and air at around 105 psi being pushed through lines around the mountain in the centre of the Cairngorm Valley, and snowmaking lancers were deployed either side of the water and air lines. Only found a few photos of that in operation, and they're really small, so I haven't incorporated them into this PowerPoint. Would love to have seen some video of that working. Around 2009, Cairngorm started experimenting with modern fan guns. First, as you can see in this picture, a Sufarg compact power from Austria for a year, and then, like all the other ski areas, then switched to Techno Alpine, the Italian company, because I think they found their guns to be a bit more reliable and more easy to control. So they settled on getting a T40 for a year, and then once they'd proved that worked, they then went and got another 4 of them, and then after a bit more time, a TF10, and then most recently 8 TR8s in 2018. And then they expect to purchase about another 3 or 4 T40s and probably another 5 to 10 TF10s over the next 3 or 4 years. And this will allow for more snowmaking from the car park all the way up to the top of the Cairngorm Valley, which is a distance of probably just over a mile. And then they'll put in, the water and power outlets for them all. And they might even go up towards the summit as well. Anyway, some of these photos I find quite funny because of the irony of people digging out a snow cannon on a mountain. It's just, I think it's quite hilarious, really. The thing snowed itself in. And I think one of the reasons why they're using these rather than the Lancers is because noise pollution isn't an issue. These places are miles away from accommodation, and they need forced air to be able to push the snow in the direction they want it to go. And also it just means that they can get away with lower or warmer temperatures, milder temperatures, while they're making the snow. And there's some pictures of the TR8s in action. How it's all been powered and water supplies is quite interesting there. I mean, the Lect and Glenshee, they have a much more dedicated system. Same with particularly Nevis Range, and a little bit to the side, I guess, Glencoe. But with Cairngorm for years now, they've just simply dug holes in the streams and put submersible pumps in there, and then pumped the water out, and that then goes into the snow cannons. The snow cannons have these external boxes or accessory boxes that you can see in silver at the base, and they actually contain another water pump which then boosts the pressure from around about 8 psi to the required sort of 80-90 psi that these machines operate at. So that means there's 2 water pumps per unit, and so they're just locally pumping the water out the stream. The pipes run underneath the snow, not even in pipes underground, and then the power for many years was just a few outlets here and there and generators. So for the first year when they got the TR8s, they were powering them all off little 20-30 kVA generators, which was not ideal. And in the photo at the top right there, you can see even the snow factory has a giant generator next to it, and they've solved that now. They've actually got mains powering, but when they initially got it, they didn't think, oh crikey, we need a load of power to run this lot. So yeah, it's a bit of a change from before. And the other thing is, at one point they could only run either the snow cannons or the lifts because they were sharing the same power supply. So that's interesting. Now they've got a proper water pump system set in behind the snow factory, which pumps the water up, filters it, pumps it into the snow factory, and then also delivers quite a bit up to the snow cannons. Now the snow factory that got purchased in October 2018 and quite hastily shipped over from Italy and assembled on site in 2018, and it was quite a worry for a lot of people because of its location, it's exposed to high winds, and the way they're put together, they are supposed to be stacked, not side by side, so they had to be arranged like that. And so it had its own concrete foundation poured, and the whole thing is welded together, so it can't flip over or tear itself away from the base. But even in its current location, it's only a temporary solution, because eventually they want to move that entire unit, deconstruct it, and move it up the mountain by about 120 meters to the shieling, and that way it'll be able to pump snow up from there and then also down more efficiently. And that will require quite a lot of pipe buried underneath ground to duct the snow. It might also be clad eventually and buried into the hillside, because at the moment it's a bit of an eyesore, really. I mean, Techno Alpine, bless them, they want to see their product advertised, but in a culturally sensitive environment, it's not really the most ideal thing to be just there, a couple of white shipping containers blocking the view. So yes, anyway, I'm going to now move on to the lifts. Where is my bit about the funicular? So the funicular was built in 2000 and also 2001, and it replaces two chairlifts that were essentially Von Roll lifts, but actually produced by GMD Muller. Although we'll find out later that it was actually GMD Muller that was selling patents at the time to Von Roll. So it's an interesting mess, and as I've gone into it, I found some quite interesting photos of the grips they were using and the way they changed over time. But anyway, eventually these lifts became obsolete. They weren't able to transport as many people as they wanted, so they decided to replace it with a funicular. Why a funicular? Well, it's because of its ability to be able to resist high winds, and the operators were worried that a gondola or a chairlift going up to the summit would be bad news, particularly in the summer, because they could end up with loads of people up there, and if the winds suddenly got up, there'd be a load of people stuck up there with no way of getting back down again, apart from walking, which could be a problem if you've got people with disabilities, or if it's just chucking it down with rain, or it's a blizzard. So they went and got this. However, it was a bit of a fiasco from the start. A lot of people didn't like it because of the amount of foundation work required, which would be disturbing the environment, but also the fact that people knew that they would ski down to the bottom of the mountain, and they might have to wait 5 minutes for this thing to pull up before they could get on board, as opposed to a gondola chairlift where it's a continuous uptake of people. But it was considered kind of early on, about early 90s, even late 80s, that they had to replace the chairlifts with something. And yeah, the problems with the chairlifts were they're old, they're only capable of transporting 580 people per hour each. Maximum speed was 3.6 meters, which was fast for 1960, but by 2000 that was only just a little bit faster than a fixed grip double chair. And the valley of the station of the White Lady chair was originally connected to the car park chairlift, so you'd have had two detachable twin chairlifts that were linked together in a central station, which was kind of common with Von Roll 101 lifts. And the idea is you'd just be able to make a seamless transition from one to the other. However, the problem with it was that the upper chairlift, the White Lady, it kept on getting blocked, the station, so they had to keep digging it out on the entrance. So then they decided to relocate the drive station for that chairlift to the roof of its original building. So the motor was left on the ground floor, the axle extended up through the roof, and everything else was built on top with another roof on top of that. And that solved that issue, but then it meant the poor skiers had to go up a chair, disembark, with their skis off, walk up a flight of stairs, and then board a second chairlift, and it was just annoying. The other problems was the lift pylons were showing their age and the sheaves were rusting. The lifts weren't very user friendly, unsuitable for children and required a lot of staff to operate. The lift was affected by winds at the very top, and thus the mountain owners and the operating company decided to install a new lift and mountain restaurants. Unfortunately, because a company called HIE, or a government body, which we'll talk about later, now owned the land and had control over Cairngorm Mountain Limited, it was decided to install a funicular, which looked good on paper as it met most of the requirements. The passenger flow would be increased to 1,200 people per hour. The maximum speed was 12 metres per second, so assuming there was no weight at the bottom, a lift up would take less than 4 minutes. And supposedly, if the funicular ran on an elevated track, the lift would not be affected by snowdrifts. The funicular would be able to take bikes, skis, snowboards, pushchairs and wheelchairs, and was very safe for children. Wouldn't be affected by wind, as I previously pointed out. However, their choice of uplift, was faced with much opposition from the skiers. The mountain conservatives and those that worked at Cairngorm had issues with it. The skiers wanted a chairlift, the mountain conservationists wanted a low impact lift with minimal foundations, and those at Cairngorm knew the funicular still wouldn't be able to sufficient to keep up with demand, and it was still prone to being snowed in. Even when they were building it, areas that were not expected to cause snowdrifts were causing snowdrifts, and so they should have known by then that it wasn't going to work out for them. Furthermore, Doppelmayr, the chosen manufacturer, even they were recommending that a funicular would be a far better choice for the mountain and would cost almost the same amount as the funicular to build. It is therefore not clear why HIE decided to build a funicular, but they have never been the type of government body to take other people's advice or listen to the professionals, so they just went ahead anyway and ordered the funicular. The construction of the lift went ahead over the course of 2 summers and was met with numerous problems, some of them expected and some of them not. First of all, it was very cold winter in 2001. A large amount of peat, heather and other plant species had to be moved out of the mountain, stored on the car park on top of tarpaulins, and then returned once the construction work was finished or found a new home for in some cases. This had to be done 94 times for each of the concrete pillars, where the new base station would be, and also where a 150-metre long tunnel that the funicular runs through, which you can see at the top of the bottom right photograph there. It goes for a tunnel for 150 metres. So that when they excavated that, they had to remove all that topsoil down to the bottom station and then put it back again when they were done. So that took a long time, and then a construction crane was erected to bring materials up to the summit, all of the grass and earth back down, and because of the winter was so harsh, they had to deconstruct that during the winter and then put it back up the following summer, which took some time. The ground was less stable than expected, causing the foundations to be deeper, and the existing chairlifts had to be kept operating within the 2000 to 2001 season. So while all this was going on, they were having to try and work around that. Once they had it constructed, the initial impressions were good. The following 2001-2002 season wasn't particularly snowy, and so the new funicular allowed skiers direct access to the top 3 toes where there was snow without having to use surface lifts dependent on snow. However, from 2005 onwards, problems started to arise. The first good snow season since 2000 came, and with it, way more customers than the funicular and other lifts could handle. It's worth noting at this point that the funicular, it says 1,200 people, but the people would, the mountain had forgotten that the 2 chairlifts could do 560 each, and you add that up and it's almost 1,200 as well. So there's really no benefit of the lift except that it got people to the top quicker. So the queues were back as a result, and so was the drifting snow. The track was getting blocked up with the snow about halfway up the M1, which was a tow and a run, and also outside of the tunnel too. This was noticed during the construction, and no one did anything about it. And of course, what people would argue now is that the tunnel should have gone down the mountain a lot further than it did, and the tunnel should have been more like 400 metres long. Since then, the funicular has come under attack from customers waiting far too long to use the lift. Sometimes people waiting up to 40 minutes just to get back up the mountain again. People feeling squashed up in the cabins, and on a maintenance note, the lifts requiring lots of work to the bogies on the trains, which are sets of wheels. The sheaves along the track, and the rope goes around in a complete loop, so that puts a lot of extra wear on the lower wheels in the system. In 2018, things came to a head when, during a routine inspection, it was noticed that bearings that support the track in places that allow for its movement were starting to wear out. Cracks in the concrete columns were forming, and rebar rust marks showing. It was then concluded that many of the pylons were poured in adverse weather and rushed to avoid delays and to make the most of gaps in the weather. The bearings were worn out in places where there were curves in the track. It was thought that the bearings just weren't of a good enough quality, and wind loads had been blamed for their failure as well. The process has really begun to rectify these faults, but it's going to be a long time before it's fixed. And they need to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so far, the estimated cost of repairing the funicular is £18 million, which, if you were listening earlier, is more than the cost of building it in the first place, which is just insane, really. And it's a real demonstration of how, when you've got a company that's public, that's being funded by the government, contractors aren't afraid to put the price up because they know that the money will be found eventually. So it's just fed by greed, that, and a lot of people argue that the work could be done for a lot less than that, more like £2.5 million. So someone's making a big profit here. Again, a big argument's arisen from the decision, and sometimes I kind of guess I show HIE some sympathy because they are stuck in a real sticky situation. They could decide to repair, but then they face opposition from those who feel it's a waste of money repairing something that doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the mountain, that could fail again. But then again, if they remove it and replace it, which costs a lot of money, the bids quoted by the greedy contractors were just as costly as to repair it because of the cost of removing such a vast amount of concrete. And then on top of that, a new lift would still have to be funded. They just simply can't win. The only solution was one in the past. The decision was not to build a funicular and instead a funital. There are no other clear options that specify the needs of the mountain. Unfortunately, here we are, and it looks like the funicular will be repaired. Chairlifts or a gondola will be built to the summit to supplement the funicular in the future and act as a backup in case the funicular fails or needs maintenance. And eventually, I think the funicular will be scrapped around 2045, so in about 25 years, I think they'll have had enough of it. So going on to the other lifts, like a lot of other places in Scotland, Cairngorm has Poma lifts, and then like another resort, Glen Shee, it has GMD Muller lifts. And for a long time, the mountain only used GMD Muller lifts. There are 4 detachable button lifts at Cairngorm Mountain that are Pomas, but there used to be 5. The Alec Bowl Poma was built in 1978 as the first in a wave of new lifts, which would bring faster and more standard lifts to the mountain. At this point, GMD Muller had put in 6 T-bars and 4 chairlifts across the mountain, but sometime in the mid-70s a change of direction to install Poma lifts began. I personally find them a bit more comfortable to ride, and they operate at twice the speed of the T-bars, at about 4 meters per second for most of them. There is, however, one fixed grip Poma, which you can see in the top left photo here, and all the rest of them are detachable grips. So this is the Anak Poma that used to run in the Sis Valley, and looking at where it was, the West Wall Poma that you can see, it's stationed right in the middle of the photograph there. Kind of does pretty much what the Anak did, so that's probably why it was removed. And the others are much newer as well. The other pomas on site include the West Wall Poma and the Funicular Ridge. Well, it's actually not the funicular. The fecal ridge. That's how it's pronounced. So like fecal waste. It's terrible, really. And the M1 Poma in 1979. So that's the M1. And this is the fecal ridge Poma. And then there's also a Day Lodge Poma, which is the last one to be built in 1988, which has a slight curve up it. Now that is actually photos of the West Wall Poma. So I'm sorry about that, Teddy. That's the wrong photos for the name. So that's the West Wall Poma is probably the best one on the mountain though, because it's quick and it gains about 350 meters of height gain in one lift, which and is fast. So it almost takes as long to ski back down as it does the ride up. And this is the Day Lodge, which I say it's the nearest, and it has a corner station. The M1 Poma was extended by 230 metres in 1991, so that just helped to give it a bit more length. So this one was extended by quite a bit, and then the West Wall Poma as well was extended in 2016 by around 80 metres, which doesn't sound much, but the intention was just to get it just high enough that users could get to the restaurant at the top, and before it didn't go up that high, because it was built before the modern ptarmigan restaurant was put in. Currently there are 4 GMD Muller T-bars at Cairngorm, but there used to be 7. They are very distinctive with their drive and tension stations, housed in these green steel panelled boxes, I guess, and they sit on rails which ride back and forth to allow the tensioning. So the whole motor, the first tower, as it will, first set of sheaves, the whole thing moves back and forth for tensioning purposes with a counterweight down the back. And the lift, you can see there, the cast T-bar, the station was originally about 5 metres lower, but that kept getting snowed in. So then they built this gantry system that's there at the moment, which prevents that problem from occurring. So they then essentially built the whole station on top of itself. Reports from the mountain staff and the mechanics at Cairngorm Mountain indicate that these are very easy to maintain, considering some of them are almost 60 years old, and they're easier to maintain than the Pomatos because a lot of the parts are off the shelf, and you can find them in standard shops around the UK. Pylons are made from steel pipe and have a distinctive look to them, with some of them not having any head frames on them at all. And the cast T-bar has a curve in it, and they do that with the use of some sheaves that are horizontally mounted, and the whole lift runs in a triangular formation. And all of these lifts have a capacity between 400 and 800 people per hour, so they kind of wildly vary. This lift you can see here used to be a T-bar, and then got converted into a button lift, and then eventually was replaced by a Sunkid branded button lift type tow. We call it the washing line for some reason. And some of these lifts have also been extended, so the car park T-bar in the top right photo, you can actually see the return station and that then got extended further up the mountain because you can see that it was forming a bit of a queue on one of the other lifts as a result. And the shielding T-bar, that did actually come from Mar Lodge, so again it's one that's been reused from somewhere else. And then here there's some photographs of the White Lady T-bar, which as you can see was quite popular at times in the past, and it had a very distinctive whine. People called it the White Lady chairlift whine, and that was caused because the gearbox was installed on it backwards, so it was working. It wasn't working in reverse because it was, converting the speed into torque, but the gears were meshing incorrectly. So when that finally gave up, the mountain was a lot quieter as a result, and it had a catastrophic failure around 2006 because the return ball wheel at the top, which looks like this, you can see the wheel at the top right there, that apparently sheared off its axle and went flying through the air about 100 meters, like just at tremendous speed with the tension on it. And when that happened, they just decided never to put it back up. And it's a real shame they didn't replace it there and then with the modern lift. So yeah, and then this was the fecal T-bar, which I've only found a few photos of, and yeah, this was another lift that got torn down around that sort of 2004-05 period. Quite a short lift as well. And then there's also then a few up in the ptarmigan cyst bowl at the very top of the mountain. They're still there, still working away fine. And the oddity with the ptarmigan lift, as you can probably see by this picture, is that one of its pylons right in the middle that I think was probably bent by too much snowfall many years ago has been replaced by a Poma pylon from another lift, and then they've then mounted the original GMD sheaves or sheave trains onto that pylon, so that's a bit unusual. And you see there what the other towers used to look like, quite different. But they seem to be maintaining these lifts. I don't think they've got any plan at the moment of getting rid of them, because they just seem to be workhorses. They just keep going, and eventually, yes, they'll get replaced, but I don't think anytime soon. They also had their GMD Muller fixed grip chairlifts, doubles, 2 of them, one after the other, with the drive stations both located at the top and the bottom of the mountain. So the oddity was that you had the middle station had 2 return wheels where the tensioning was performed for both lifts, but the tensioning was also done at the drive stations as well, so it was tensioned from both ends. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of an odd lift really. Steel lattice towers, and this kind of brings me to another area, which is the CIS chairlift controversy, which is that these lifts were built in 1974, so quite a long time after the good 14 years after the other detachable chairlifts, and they increased the capacity of the mountain. They also opened up more ski runs, but they also opened up the mountain from a different valley and a different car park. So if the main road up to the main car park was closed because of snow drifting, there was still another way up the mountain. And if the other chairlift failed, this was a backup option. So it was a good thing that it was there really. And the other thing was that just more uplift really. But the controversy arose because in 2000 the operator purchased new chairs, about 180 of them, to replace the ageing original chairs, which had this brittle red plastic on them, and the backrests were also rusting on some of the ones that had been kept near the top. And they also made some improvements and general refurbishments to the lift. So they spent a bunch of money on it. And one of the reasons for this was just to keep operations going and spread the customers out while the funicular was being constructed, which had an impact on some of the uplift in the Cass Valley. The chairlifts then ran for the last time around 2004. They continued to have a few chairs on each line as they were being used for access and maintenance purposes by the mountain staff. And around 2014, when Natural Retreats, which we'll talk about later, came in to run the mountain, it became obvious that without public pressure, these chairlifts were going to be left to rot without any intention of running them again. And indeed, by this point, the White Lady T-bar, the Fecal T-bar, and the Anak Poma had been demolished. And with queues for rides going up and getting longer, skiers wanted more lift in exchange for the ticket price. And so it was feared that these lifts would also go. A group called Save the Cyst was set up with a number of key players campaigning for the lifts to be either refurbished or replaced with modern equivalents, and we'll talk about them later. So again, you can see some of the difference between the old chairs there and the new chairs there, which are just pretty sort of standardy Doppler Maori type frames, and I think there were even two types of them. So they were put on, and then not much after. So that's a bit of a close-up there of the drive station for one of the chairs. Very much the same sort of style as the other ones for the T-bars. And the photo on the right, there's what we called the boardwalk, which was basically a platform, a walking platform, so that people that skied down into the gully had a way of walking back over to the chairlift station that was in the middle, because as you can see, the land's pretty steep and walking along that wouldn't have been much fun. So these were the other chairlifts that GMD Muller made at Cairngorm, and that was certainly pretty iconic for many years. And they are GMD Muller, but they look very much like Von Roll 101 lifts of the 1950s with side-facing chairs. And having ridden them before in Kandersteg, Switzerland, and in the General Berchtesgaden, I was initially fooled into thinking these chairlifts at Cairngorm were built by Von Roll. But in fact, it was Gerard Muller and his company GMD that invented the detachable sideways-facing chair in 1948, about a year before Von Roll had. And in 1949, Von Roll had purchased patents on GMD to make their own. And this is quite the opposite of what I expected. I expected Von Roll to be selling the patents to GMD, but this is not the case. As such, these are rare lifts, and the examples at Cairngorm are the best I can find. And the longest serving when they were removed in 2001. It is, however, worth noting that Von Roll very quickly changed the grip that was used to what we now know as the VR101 grip, and even some of the first lifts they made that had a Muller type grip then got replaced with the 101 and subsequent amendments made to the stations. The most notable difference between the GMD lifts and the Von Roll lifts was the grip. While the Von Roll 101 grip has four wheels to guide it as it entered stations and went under depression sheaves guided by rails or saddles, as they're sometimes called, the GMD Muller Type C clamp, which is the type that was being used, only had two wheels, and no rails or saddles were needed on pylons with depression sheave trains. And this has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages was that there was less wear on the grips, and that the pylons were easier to assemble, but the disadvantage was that the ride on those depression sheave trains was a bit more rough. The Von Roll grip clamp, though, like a lot of the modern Doppelmayr and Poma grips, uses a sprung compression clamp with this is in German, Arretierhebel, or locking lever in the vertical position when clamped and diagonal when open. The GMD clamp had no locking lever. Instead, it had 1 or 2 shafts that protruded away from the clamp, going back to that there, and that rotated anti-clockwise when entering a station and clockwise while leaving. So they were brushing up against bars that were basically had got rubber plates attached to them, and they then spun that rod round to unrelease the grip. So it's quite different. This system was incredibly reliable, as there weren't any faults or flaws with it even into the 2000s, but it limited its clamping pressure, and this was unable to take the load of more than a 4-person gondola cabin with 2 clamps side by side. So they did use this clamping system for gondolas as well. So here's some more photographs of that. Going back to this first one, what you'll notice is the bottom left photo there shows the chairlift as it comes in from the car park chairlift from the first stage, goes into a building, there's a corner, and then the chairlift exits again. And the change that can be seen in the middle photo at the top is that all of a sudden this building gets put on top of the original station, and a set of stairs is put up on the outside. And so that's the change that had to be implemented to prevent it snowing up at the bottom. The photo at the centre there shows the lift in its last sort of days when they were starting to deconstruct everything. Bit sad. Got the impression there was a lot of people that were a bit mortified when they got rid of that thing. It's as slow and as horrible to use. It just eked of nostalgia. And that was the bottom station, the left there. And they still have a few remnants lying around, like one of the ball wheels and a chair hanging as a swing seat. And these are some historical photographs. Please excuse the nudity there, but there's this guy that always used to ski around. And to the top right there, left there, that's the original Ptarmigan restaurant building, which was a dome shape. And as you can see, back in the 70s, it was quite a popular destination. And amazingly, just people put up with the queues back then. And then they started deconstructing it. So there's a bit of some photos there where it's halfway in between them putting up the funicular and taking down the old chair. And some of these photos of the construction crane that was being used to move materials up the mountain. So there's a lot of pylons around. And these photos that were provided by Graham Pringle show the funicular cabin being delivered. And then we go into this. So I promise I took this is not to do with lifts or skiing at all really, but it's more to do with lift business. So Cairngorm has gone from quite a good place to being a bit rubbish, and as you can see from these this diagram I put together, part of the problem is there's just too much management now there. So a lot of the money gets wasted on directors and managers and going through other subsidiary businesses and whatnot. So originally there was like no operating company, no parent company, it was just one company. They owned the assets, they ran the place, the land was owned by the Scottish government, and then the Scottish government then decided to buy up all of the assets on the land in the early 90s, and then shortly after a body in Scotland was formed to look after various bits of property within Scotland called Highlands and Islands, or HIE, and they have multiple subsidiaries within them, such as the Assets Limited and HIE Body and various other things. And around this point, when the funicular opened, Cairngorm Chairlift Co. turned into Cairngorm Mountain Limited, or CML, and in their great wisdom, HIE decided around this point that they should um, oversee that company, and so it's very much a case of the government putting their fingers into a business when they probably shouldn't have. And the advantage for the Cairngorm Mountain Limited at this point was that they were getting their funicular paid for by the government. The disadvantage was they lost control of what was going on there, and so they started making a bit of a loss. And Highlands and Islands decided that what they'd prefer to do is have themselves as a parent company and sell the operating company to Natural Retreats and have a company called NAIL, or Natural Natural Asset and Investments Limited, take over the assets on the mountain. The government would still effectively own the land, and Cairngorm Mountain Limited would be squashed in the middle between an operating company, the government, and its own company, NAIL. And this just didn't work out. The funicular broke, NAIL threw in the towel and buggered off, leaving just a massive disaster behind. So now it's a mountain that makes like £2.5 million loss every single year on, year out. They're not expected to ever make a profit from the financial reports I've looked at. And it's just because they're spending too much money and they can't keep their costs down, which is just a real shame. So I've pretty much explained everything there in the notes that I've written. But yeah, Natural Retreats, I've written that the company was very ill suited to the task of running the mountain. They were getting revenues of between £7 and £11 million on an annual basis, but in 2013, the year before they took on Cairngorm, they made a £1.2 million loss and £1.65 million in 2012. And what they really did was they ran a company with holiday homes and small hotels, not a ski resort or adventure centre, and they also had huge debts. And so it's now suspected that Natural Retreats were looking at taking advantage of Cairngorm Mountain in order to make a bunch of money and cure their own financial problems. But the problem is that a ski resort ageing with all this infrastructure needs investment and long-term operation in order to make money. And Natural Retreats were wanting to do the opposite. Even though they were proposing things to be done, they weren't wanting to spend any of their own money on this. And when several good seasons came, they still weren't getting many profits in, and therefore NAIL Natural Retreats started a process called asset stripping, basically selling off assets on the mountain, whatever they could to sort of bring in some money. And with this not working either, and huge pressure from both the public, HIE, and its own employees, and customers just hating the crap out of them, it caused them to basically have a bit of a hissy fit, and they threw in the towel in 2018 in October, just after the funicular had basically got engineering defects and flaws, and pretty much overnight gathered up its belongings and left the mountain in a very fast hurry on the 21st of October 2018. Its directors and managers have pretty much never spoken about the situation since, and the name of the company's been changed to try and forget about all this sort. And it was then once again for HIE to run CML, subsidise the cost of running the mountain while little income came in, and pay off all the debts that NAIL left behind. So it was a huge disaster for everyone, and the fact skiing took place in the 2018 and 2019 season is a bit of a miracle, really. Since then, there have been no plans to do anything with CML, at least not until the funicular has been fixed, and that's the way it'll be. And people like me and as a community buyout group basically kind of feel that there is one way forward, which is HIE needs to own up to its mistakes in the past and apologise to the public for doing all sorts of wrong things, including appointing Natural Retreats They should have known that it was a bad company to take over, and they should have known that funicular wasn't a good thing to put in, and they should have known not to allow contractors to charge them what they've charged and to go out looking for other bids, other quotes from other companies. They should fire the existing range of middle managers and consultants and directors. So basically, it's just the middle management in that company is breeding like sheep, so they need to be fired. Keep the core staff of mechanics, mosquito operators, beast groomer operators, kitchen staff. All those people in the company need to be kept. And then allow a group of local businessmen, the actual community buyouts group that are in Aviemore, to take over the mountain, hand over the mountain, the assets and the staff, along with about £2 million worth of start-up funds. Provide a recommended grant of 28 million to allow the building of 2 new 6-pack chairlifts, as outlined in a plan that SE Group Consultants in USA proposed several years ago, each with a middle station to allow for middle boarding. One of them would replace 2 1960s T-bars, the car park T-bar and the CAS T-bar, while the other one replacing the 2 double chairlifts, the CIS chairlift and the Westwall chair that were removed in 2017. And then other money within the 28 million would be spent on a new summit lift to replace the 2 T-bars in the Tarmingen area and provide access to a higher snowfield around the area that we call the Marquee Swell. And then around 2 new fan guns for snowmaking, pump station, power supplies, and then the summer activities, which would be a zip line tour, mountain biking trails, a mountain coaster, and walking paths, just renovations to those. And the result of these decisions would result in a more streamlined resort with 3 main lifts, 2 chairs and a funicular, 5 Poma lifts, all of the same type. The steel from the T-bar would be worth quite a bit if they waited until the national recession has ended, because they're just so heavy. And then because of all this lot, the amount of personnel required to run the lifts would be less. And then together with the summer attractions, the resort would be less dependent on the winter, and they could bring in money more all the time, really. Yeah, and the only real problem is that HI just aren't really willing to go through with productive plans. Instead, they seem quite happy to spend £180,000 on a report. This is the one that SE provided from the US. Instead, and I mean, I'd charge them £300 and come up with much better ideas. That's just ridiculous. Like, why does it need that amount of money? It just doesn't, And yeah, so sorry about the rant. So to this day, Cairngorm operates at huge financial loss because it's publicly owned. This is just billed to the taxpayer. With it being publicly owned, it also attracts the greedy contractors I mentioned before, and they just put out these overpriced contracts simply because they know HI can simply ask the government for more money. And the mountain's just a sad example of something that was set up by passionate skiers and mountain lovers with hard work and personal donations, became the best resort in Scotland with a very modern lift system by about 1988 probably was at its peak. Great après ski in the town of Aviemore, amazing hotels there, and then was destroyed by the bureaucrats, the idiots, the rich, the greedy and the ignorant. What is even more of a shame is that Cairngorm Mountain offers the best skiing terrain in Scotland, with such a wide range of terrain. And for those that want to endure the old and faulty lifts, expensive lift tickets, poor customer service in exchange for that terrain and skiing is a torment and a bit of a love-hate relationship. Meanwhile, the businesses in the once thriving town of Aviemore and the villages of Coilinbridge and Botergarden, Tulloch, Speyside and many more are all suffering due to a loss of passing trade, holidaymakers, skiers and other businesses closing down. One business will always rely on several others, be it a hardware shop, a food outlet or a courier company. It's very sad to see such a domino effect occurring in the area, And it's because of this that the local businesses want to club together to resurrect Cairngorm, make it their own, and start making some smart decisions to revive the mountain and the fortune in the local area. So this is back to the SIST campaign where they were trying to have these lifts either saved or replaced, and it never happened. And they put together plans and campaigns, and they got in, newspapers and radio and stuff. And one of the organisers was Alan Battery, who heads up the Winter Highland Forum, which is a popular forum and place where you can see live webcam images from various places in Scotland. And then Graham Pringle, my own friend, and even I didn't know he was part of this group until more recently. And he worked as a mountain ambassador in the early 2000s for Cairngorm. So essentially, we're showing people around, helping out the ski patrol, made provisions for TV companies that came in to film on the estate, and he still skis there very regularly, even during the pandemic, because he just ski tours up there. The group came up with lots of plans of how to redevelop the areas, and over 3,150 signatures from skiers requesting that uplift remained in place and was brought into use. Community spirit really grew, and it was becoming, kind of obvious that they could actually make changes here. But it was a really big corporate giant. Essentially, they were fighting against versus the customer. Everyone was, on with it, and eventually a community buyout plan was conceived. The idea was to take over half the mountain, the SIST side, redevelop it as a SIST, and sell tickets to either that half of the mountain, or skiers could pay a bit more and ski over the whole mountain in both valleys. And that plan just was never accepted either. And then, then they thought, well, should we just replace both of the lifts, because Cairngorm were arguing they weren't serviceable. So get 2 second-hand chairs, or even brand new ones, put a mid-load station in at 650 metres, a beginning area at the base of the Annex Poma. Refurbished west wall Poma, a new west chair, new east chair. They went over the top a bit with all sorts of ideas. And then eventually, just almost literally overnight, they tore the thing down, gas axed it, removed everything apart from the concrete foundations, which were deemed to be in a good enough state that they might be able to support a future lift. And all the chairs were sold off, for cheap, like 30 quid each or something. And I'm a bit annoyed I didn't get the chance to buy one of those. I'd quite like to have got a few, put them up in my own garden. And the web, once that happened, the web exploded with angry skiers, and this was the real downfall of Natural Retreats at the time as an operator, because they were just censoring all the comments on social media. People noticed it, and eventually they had to remove their Facebook and Twitter accounts because it was just becoming so problematic. There were reports of people putting graffiti on Natural Retreat signage around the area. Ticket sales for that year fell to an all-time low despite good conditions, because all the skiers were just going elsewhere. And in a single summer, Natural Retreats had driven away about 75% of its customers to other ski resorts in the area, much to the delight of Nevis Range and the Lex, the two closest to Cairngorm. A bit of a rivalry then started with Alan using his Winter Highland Forum to bash the company at every stage and create various other websites, all interconnected, to condemn Natural Retreats, Cairngorm Mountain Limited and HIE for their part in allowing Natural Retreats to take control. And then in response, Natural Retreats then forcefully broke into the Scottish Ski Club above the White Lady ski run and the funicular, ripped out thousands of pounds worth of webcam gear and computer gear belonging to Winter Highland and by extension Alan, and then charged Natural Retreats with theft and vandalism. I think it ended up in a bit of a court case, but it was just like, the two were going to war with each other. And so bit of a sad story really, how that all came about. I think some videos coming up. This one I'm pretty sure is about from the 60s. and 1970. Yeah. So I'll watch this.
It is Scotland's snow that provides the main attraction and draws holidaymakers like a magnet to the ski runs of the Cairngorm Mountain. Early on the crisp, cool winter's mornings, all sorts and conditions of vehicles converge onto the mountain road. From Loch Morlich, the climb begins and the snow appears. This is Christmas card land, and it even includes the reindeer. This area possesses the only herd in Britain. The nucleus came from Sweden in 1952, and it became acclimatized quickly to its new surroundings. And here's comfort for the skiing tyros. Even a reindeer has to learn to keep its feet. And still the skiers come, now deep amid the whiteness of the high mountain. A chairlift takes them nearly 1,500 feet up to the top of the White Lady, 3,750 feet above sea level. Fine day, you can see for an incredible distance. It travels over a mile, and on the way you can look down on the early arrivals, knowing that soon you too will be joining in the fun. The Central Highlands of Scotland are a splendid setting for winter sports. At Glencoe, Glenshee, or in the Cairngorms, there are runs of 1,500 feet and over. Development of the area as a winter sports centre began only 10 years ago, but already others are being planned. The chairlift is an exciting way to reach the top. It's an experience which never fails to please however many times you do it. Or you can hook yourself to one or all of the 3 T-bar toes, a pleasant way up for the more experienced. And the cool swish of skis is the only sound of which you're aware.
It has been said that skiing is like golf. The earlier you start, the better. Well, there are plenty of nursery slopes hereabouts for the little ones, and beginners of any age. The Spey Valley is one of the world's most highly developed ski areas, and that's a fact. Less than 20 years ago, if you'd wanted to ski here, you'd have had to climb for hours to get to the top of the Cairngorms. There were no ski lifts at all. Now there are often as many as 5,000 skiers on the slopes in one day. There are enough ski schools, too, to make sure you can always keep on your feet, at least. Well, nearly always. There are 100 expert instructors to show you how it's done. And they'll tell you that within a week from strapping on your first ski boot, you'll be coming down the mountain like a bird. If you're interested in records at all, not breaking them, that is, but the other kind, you can eat at the Ptarmigan at 3,656 feet above sea level, the highest restaurant in Britain. Whenever they advertise for staff here, it reads, "Wanted pretty waitress, must be good skier or live in." It could be just a joke for the visitors, mind you, for they could always use the chairlift. Or perhaps if they were in a hurry, the snow trick. Snow cats, too. Not as agile, perhaps, as the little fellow, but they are the ones that bring fresh food to the restaurants every day. This one they call the White Lady Shilling. It's just about halfway up. Believe it or not, they have haggis on the menu every day if you want it. You can get soup, steak, eggs, and chips, too, of course. Many of the sporting events are international. The slalom is always a big event, with competitors from all over Europe.
In front of you, the entire view of the Strath to the Murray coast and beyond is something quite special, and hopefully weather conditions and visibility today will permit you to enjoy it. Panoramic views are weather dependent, but hopefully to the left, facing down the hill, you can see the large glacial eroded corrie, Corrie Cass. The name Corrie Cass, which is translated from the Gaelic language, means steep hollow. All the names of the mountains and glens in the surrounding area are of Gaelic origin, but some have been anglified over the years. Within Corrie Cass there is a small network of footpath trails for you to enjoy, which is started at the car park. You can get more information about these walking routes from the ranger base, which is situated in the base station. Further afield and directly ahead, Glenmore may be visible, along with Lochmorley. Both of these areas offer many attractive walks and cycle paths, which are generally protected from the worst of the weather by the forest.
Looking ahead and down the track, you may be able to see the passing loop. The passing loop is exactly halfway along the 1.8-kilometre length of the track. It is the only section of double track on the route, and the only time when the carriages come close together. There are two carriages and they are connected by a steel rope. At the passing loop, the carriages always pass on the same side. Carriage 1 always passes on the right going down.
The Cairngorm Funicular Railway was constructed over a period of 3 years and is one of the more recent to be built in this country. Special design considerations had to be included to help the structure cope with the extreme weather that occurs in these mountains. The Victorians introduced funiculars to the UK, and they take their name from the Latin word for a rope, funis. Each carriage weighs a total of 15 tons. That's the equivalent of about 12 family cars, and can carry a maximum of 120 passengers standing. This is a bit of a squeeze during the busy days in winter, and we've reduced this capacity for a more comfortable summer journey. The transport system is powered by two 500 kilowatt motors, which are located at the top station. Each carriage is attached to a haul rope, while a lighter counter rope is also attached to the carriages to form a complete loop. The counter rope maintains the tension in the pulling system. As the carriage at the bottom is hauled up, so the top carriage descends, very much like a lift. As one goes up, the other one goes down. The carriages are connected by the ropes and can only move at the same time. The whole system is operated by computer from the control room at the top.
Moving back to the landscape, many visitors ask about the fencing on the mountain. This fencing is critical to gathering snow on the ski runs in winter. As the snow falls in the wind, it is blown into the fences and drifts build up along the lee side. Snow moving machines called piece machines then move the drifted snow from the side of the fences, spread it out and pack it down on the ski runs. Red grouse and ptarmigan can often be seen sheltering behind the fencing on stormy days, providing an alternative to the mountain woodland scrub habitat which is now absent from most of Scotland.
When the snow does eventually melt, it reveals a number of footpath trails, including the All Abilities Trail and the Lower Cass Loop, which leads on to the Corrie Cass Mountain Trail. These footpaths have been designed to allow visitors to discover the mountain in relative safety and in their own time. If you're very lucky, from these paths you can see most of the plants, animals and birds that inhabit these high parts. As we approach the end of our journey, on the left-hand side looking downhill is the Mountain Garden and Camera Obscura building. The Mountain Garden has been developed to display and demonstrate some of the amazing plant and tree communities which can be found here in the high Cairngorm Mountains. On behalf of the staff here at Cairngorm, we thank you for being with us today and hope that you have enjoyed your visit. We look forward to welcoming you, your friends and family back again sometime in the future, and we wish you a safe onward journey.